So welcome everyone. Thank you so much for being here. For those who don't know, we are from the Grimaldis Gallery, and I'm going to be moderating a talk with Rania Matar, Ben Marcin, and Alfonso Fernandez. So Grimaldis Gallery is the longest continually operating gallery in Baltimore City. We opened in 1977 with a focus on local and regional artists, encouraging a spirit of exploration and experimentation. Within just a few years, our owner, Constantine Grimaldis, began to exhibit important international artists, beginning with Grace Hardigan, Elaine de Kooning, Alice Neal, Anne Truitt, and Sir Anthony Caro. Continually developing its distinct curatorial viewpoint, the gallery maintained its commitment to emerging and mid-career artists while simultaneously developing relationships with many of the major names of the day, including John Baldessari, Willem de Kooning, Robert Rauschenberg, Richard Serra, Joel Shapiro, and John Waters. Focusing on a selective roster, the gallery promoted younger artists like Chul Hanan, Beverly McKeever, Jay Coe, and John Rupert, exhibiting their work with more well-known artists in both the regular gallery program and at international art fairs in the United States and Europe. Currently on view at the C. Grimaldis Gallery is our 43rd annual group exhibition, Summer 20, featuring 14 contemporary artists working in painting, drawing, collage, sculpture, and photography. Today, we are delighted to be joined by three of our exhibiting artists, Rania Matar, Alfonso Fernandez, and Ben Marcin. Our conversation today will center around socioeconomic politics, global displacement, and the artist's role in capturing important moments in history. We will start with brief introductions to the work of each of the three artists, and then move to a guided conversation, after which we will have time for audience questions. And rather than take up our dialogue time by reading all of these artists' impressive bios, I will post their bios in the chat during their introductions. All of you that are here listening, feel free to post questions in the chat. When we get to the audience question and answer portion, you can turn on your audio and ask your question yourself if you would like, but I can also read your question from the chat to our artists as well. And one last note before we begin our conversation, I would like to take a moment to remember those who lost their lives, their family members, and those who have been displaced in the recent tragic events in Beirut, Lebanon, where our exhibiting artist Rania Matar is from. As a result of the recent explosions in Beirut, 200 dead and counting, 6,000 injured, and 300,000 displaced, Rania partnered with the Social and Economic Action for Lebanon, also known as SEAL, in offering 2 photographs to raise funds for SEAL's Beirut Emergency Fund. SEAL is a Lebanese-American nonprofit, non-political organization, and all funds will be used to support local non-governmental organizations and provide relief assistance. Rania raised a total of $67,000. Although the edition photographs have been sold out, I am going to post the links here for anyone who would like to privately donate. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rania to give us a brief introduction to your work, and I will share my screen and show some work.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much, Julia. And it's lovely to be here with Ben and Alfonso. I'm sorry that I don't get to see the show in person, but anyway, this is the next best thing, I guess. I met Kostas very funnily. I mean, it's like life going full circle a little bit, because I met Kostas when he saw one of my images that I had donated to raise funds at that point for Syrian refugees, and he bought it, and we started working together, and here I am now doing the same thing. So just as my background, I'm born and raised in Lebanon. I came to the United States to go to college, and I actually studied architecture at first and worked as an architect for many years. I became a photographer. I mean, I started taking a lot of photo workshops to photograph mainly my children. and fell in love with the medium of photography and realized quickly, maybe wait a tiny second, Julia, realized quickly that I was telling a very different story, and I was really craving. I loved working with people, and I loved working very intimately with people. After September 11, I think this is when I became fully a photographer, and I wanted to tell a very different story from the Middle East. I mean, the whole rhetoric was them versus us, and I live in this country. We're talking about displacement. I mean, I live here. I'm American, but I'm very tied to Lebanon as well, and it seems like I've been here 30 plus years, and there's still chaos there somehow. So Lebanon became very much an important part of my work. The series that you're starting with here is the series that actually connected me to Kostas. Most of my work over the years has really been about girlhood and womanhood and growing up, and it's really influenced by my daughter and my personal life as my girls are getting older and as I'm getting older. But this project happened in 2014 when I was in Lebanon, and there were so many Syrian refugees all over the city in Beirut, and it was before it was anywhere on the news around the world. And I started talking to the kids and became very interested in putting a face on them and bringing awareness, because when we hear about the millions of refugees, we tend to forget about the individual, and there was something about just seeing the one kid alone. But I also realized they were all standing in front of these graffiti walls. If you want to move a slide. So they were all standing in front of all these graffiti walls. So in some way they became another layer on these walls. And what I was saying is at some point I started photographing them as a side project, and I also wanted to help. So I offered a print and all the proceeds were being donated to the Karam Foundation, and Kostas very generously contributed then, and then contacted me that he wanted to show that body of work, and that was in 2015 or 16, and so that's how I started working with Kostas, and now very generously he recontributed to my new fundraiser. So I feel like the circle is closing. So this project, if you want to go, can you go? So yes, and then I started including as well as part of the work Palestinian refugees, because they're also there's 500,000 of them in a tiny little country like Lebanon, and I called it Invisible Children, that series. But throughout this work, I became very interested as well in the texture of the walls, and so it kind of moved. If you want to go to my next project. So in 2016, I started a series that I was doing a residency in Kenyon, Ohio, and I fell in love with the landscape. And all my work up to that point had been about girls and again, growing up, but it was mainly at the house in their own surrounding. And this is a time, same ages of my daughters, where these young women have left home and they're in a different surrounding, they're making their own. So I started photographing them in that landscape they were finding themselves in. And the work started being very much focused on physicality and tactility and texture, and how and eventually on empowerment and collaboration with the girls. And of course, it became important for me, as with the rest of my work, to include Lebanon as well. You could keep going here. So this is, so I started including women in Lebanon because for me, it's very much part of the work I've been making, where I want to focus on our shared humanity and how, instead of focusing on the them versus us, focusing on the universality of growing up as a woman. And the refugee projects with the walls and all this was very much the fabric of Lebanon. So I started working on this, I worked on this project for 3 years. Actually, I was very grateful and honored to get a Guggenheim Fellowship for this work. So I was able to travel quite a bit to do this work and to reach a variety of women and background. And this, I was just going to say something about that picture specifically, because this is in southern Lebanon, and that woman, Ala, had sent me a message on Instagram, asked me to collaborate with her. And, you know, it was interesting because I'm looking at her, she's fully covered in black, and I thought it's almost like an oxymoron. And, but her tagline on Instagram was, "Follow me, I'm toxic." I'm like, oh my God, there's something there. So eventually we connected. And since then I've collaborated with her so many times. She brings such a creativity and ideas to the shoot. And for me, this is really the whole thing of, I want it to be about this collaboration and empowerment. And she's been fantastic to work with. So you could keep going. I mean, and again, so I started at some point stopping these girls everywhere, on the street, at the supermarket, and then, you know, I would send them like a little, I asked them if I could have their emails, and I would send them what I'm doing about the work. And it was incredible how people just were willing to be part of this. And the process became extremely collaborative. So I'm not just going there, I'm going there not knowing what to expect. She's not knowing what to expect. And we really make this happen together. And it's a matter of spending time. And I realized this, a lot of the girls, they're strong. It's about risk taking. I mean, here she looks so peaceful, but she and I were injured. Our feet were bleeding. There were little tiny mosquitoes everywhere in the water. And she had asked me, because she was standing there and she saw me look at the water, and she's like, do you want me to get in? And I'm like, well, as a mother, I would say no, but as a photographer, I would love you to. And she actually got in the water. So it was really something that could not have happened unless we really worked the whole situation together. This is a project I worked on for 3 years. This is the last we're showing of that series because it ties it a little bit to the work I'm making now, ironically. So I'm starting to work on a book of this work, and the first 2 weeks of the lockdown in March, I realized, okay, I've been shooting for those 3 years. Now is the time to edit the work. So I spread it all over my floor in my studio, and I started being drawn to all these pictures where there was a sense of inside and outside. And before I knew it, I found myself also staring from my kitchen at my neighbor, 2 houses like across my yard and her yard, and she would sit in the little nook and read, and I thought that was very beautiful. So I had the idea of starting this project where I photograph people through the window. So this evolved to this new body of work that's really something that I did during COVID. And I put a little note on Instagram saying, I had a picture that I found on my floor when I was editing, and I put on Instagram saying, I would love, if anybody's interested, I would love to come photograph you at your window. And that was such a heavy time for people that I got an incredible response. And usually when I have to schedule a shoot, we have to say, okay, maybe in 2 weeks at 5 o'clock or whatever. Here, people would say like, come anytime. And especially at the beginning where there was this sense of heaviness. And so I would go there, and I'm like, you know, with my little step stool, and I'm photographing people through the window. And I realized quickly that it was very different from what I thought it was going to be, where I thought I'm going to go and make a quick picture, but it was very much going there and making it a real photo shoot. So I was spending a long time with them, with the people. And what was interesting is I found that I was photographing with my She project, the women in relation to the landscape. And on some level, this was happening again through the window, because the landscape was often reflected into the window. And then here you had, and then as time went by, there was the heaviness kind of people, when I first went, would be wearing their pajamas or their sweats or whatever they're wearing. And as time went by and the new normal became that, people started dressing up and performing for me from the window. So I thought that was very cool how it was evolving. And again, the whole sense of reflection and how it started to be, the whole sense of being outside and inside was blurred. I felt like everything in those moments were blurred, the sense of time and the sense of the whole sense of inside and outside again. I don't know if I'm showing anymore. And I think that's the last one I'm showing here because, for me, that was very touching. I mean, that's the COVID baby. And since then I re-photographed her and she did have the baby after that. And this project was very much about connection and connectivity. And, at a moment where we each isolated, I felt like it was maybe a physical distancing, but it shouldn't be a social distancing. I mean, I love working with people and it was very, very beautiful to have that connection that was created between me and the people I was photographing. So the circle kept growing because people would tell their neighbors and their friends. And here, all my other work was mainly about womanhood, and I would work on a project. Here, it's like we're all in the same boat, women, men, guy, little kids, adults. So I was photographing anybody who was willing to be photographed. So this, I'm just going to end with that. I mean, the last 2 weeks have been absolutely devastating for me. I don't want to start crying, but what happened in Beirut was beyond, I'm sure most of you saw it on the news. It's been very horrendous, and I felt very helpless. My father lives there. My husband's father lives there. My husband's father's house was destroyed. So we have friends who got hurt. So it's hitting very, very close to home. And I felt helpless, but at the same time, I realized, you know, it's on the news now. People are watching it now. So I came up with an idea of making a fundraiser like right away for that. And I was humbled. So the picture on the left is the picture I first offered, and I sent the blast email and I put it on Instagram and on Facebook. Within 10 hours, I sold 30 pictures, and then I didn't even have time to shut down PayPal, so I had to create three APs as well. So I thought I sold 30 plus 3 APs. It was so humbling and emotional how people were stepping up for that. I wasn't selling them for cheap. They were $1,000 each. So people were very generous and kind, and it was humbling. So I offered another fundraiser, which is a picture on the left, on the right, and it has since sold out as well. But just to talk about how we started and how we're ending here, I'm sorry if I'm going over time. Costas was the first person who bought my other picture and one of the first one who bought this one. So I feel like I'm very grateful to Costas for that.
Great, thank you so much, Rania. We're going to move to Ben. Ben, you can start talking. I'm going to slowly unshare and share quickly so I can admit other people who might be in our waiting room, but go ahead, Ben, whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Hi, I'm Ben Marcin. Thanks everybody for joining and taking a look at all of this work of the three of our artists here. I've been in Baltimore since the late 70s. I've been here a long time. I've known Costas 7, 8 years. So I'm probably one of his newer artists, but I've been doing this work for a very long time. I grew up in Germany, mostly my first 10 years. When my dad got a job at the Library of Congress, our family moved here in this area. So I've been here for a long time. Much of my work has to do with homes and the passing of time, homes in a state of transition. Usually on the downside, there's generally a strong sense of isolation in these homes, and sometimes a sense of history, if I'm lucky, and also irony. Last House Standing, this is the first picture here. This was the first piece I did for Last House Standing over 10 years ago. And I approached this not with any political context or social demographic ideas. I just saw this as this very unusual building. It's obviously over 100 years old. You can tell by the cornices, and it was also attached clearly at some time to other houses just like it and just staying there by itself. Over time, I saw other row houses like it, and the question started forming in my mind, well, what was that conversation? You can keep going. What was that conversation like when the wrecking ball showed up, okay? Usually when the city or the government shows up and they want to declare eminent domain on an entire block like this, to rehab the neighborhood or revitalize it. The houses are abandoned, most of them. They just tear the whole block down, but frequently you get a house like this is standing by itself. So I just had to ask the question. I wonder what that conversation was like the day they showed up. And in that sense, there's a bit of an act of defiance in these pictures. It didn't go down for whatever reason. This is a picture in Camden, New Jersey. Most of my pictures of these are in Baltimore. I had expected over time to find more of these as houses were torn down, but in fact, over the years since I started this project, the ones that were left standing have been themselves torn down. Shoot over. So now I've been going back and taking pictures of the vacant lots where the defiant last house standing houses were, at one time standing. You have to understand, these buildings are 130, 140 years old. They've been through a lot. And the things that have happened here in Baltimore and Camden and Philadelphia in the last 40, 50 years just brought this onslaught of change and devastation to these neighborhoods. And these pictures really pose some questions about government and what brought about these situations and what can be done to prevent this in the future. Okay, that's that project. I've also been photographing some of the old houses out on the Eastern Shore and out in the rural areas out here. You don't really see houses like this in Europe or France and Germany, left to just stand by themselves. I mean, this house should have been sold or given off to its heirs, but it's been left abandoned for years and years. And there are many like it. The camps I shot 9 or 10 years ago, now you see them all over the place, but back then it was sort of a new thing. And I was really attracted to a group of hobos that were encamped in the Baltimore area in different spots. And I say hobos, not in a disparaging way, but to distinguish between hobos and homeless. The homeless are not homeless by choice. These guys, a lot of them, they don't want to live on the dirt like this, but it's their choice. They've chosen this way of life. They're traveling by rail. They're going to different cities, and they build these fantastic McMansions in the weeds like this. This house here is built entirely of doors. The ceiling is made of doors. All the walls are made of doors. I didn't know which door he was going to come out of when he approached me, and a lot of them were like this. And they knew the bulldozer was coming. None of these camps were there a year after I took their photographs. They knew the bulldozers were coming, but they still wanted to make their own little domain here. And to me, that showed a lot of character and defiance in the way they approached their lives at the bottom of the totem pole, really. And one of the themes that runs through a lot of my work on houses is we are pretty much the wealthiest nation in the world, and what forces conspire to create all these different kinds of conditions where people are living in these situations, these kind of buildings and camps and and houses in the middle of nowhere. Some of that work led into my Out West series, which is really a document of some of the old prairie houses from over a century ago. In the 1910s and 20s, a lot of people came out west from the east to strike out on their own new opportunities. There was a lot of land. And they were farmers, and they would get these plots of land and farm them, and they really didn't know how to do it. The prairie is different than out east. They dug up all the grass, the prairie grass, which had roots that kept the sand from coming up. And of course, the first couple of droughts during the Dust Bowl just spelled doom for all these poor folks. A lot of them ended up going to California. They had abandoned these homes, and they went to California, where it wasn't much better because the Great Depression was in full swing, and they really suffered as a result. So a lot of these, what attracted me to these homes was just standing there, looking at them, and asking the question, well, what would have made somebody put a stake down here? What frame of mind, what state of mind, what was their outlook on life that caused them to plop down right here, 20 miles from the next house, and think that this was going to work? And this is a part of American history. Along with the prairie houses, I shot the ranches, which are these actually very large operations. When you from here, these look a little like the prairie homes, the isolation, and the fact there's nothing on either side in the big sky. But when you get up close to them, they are big operations with large equipment, trucks, and the fact is the landscape out there is such that it's dry, and you need to have a lot of land just to make anything work out there. I wouldn't say these are corporate farms, but they're pretty well-to-do ranches, and the only way to make this work, I mean, I sat on this for about 6 or 7 years and realized, well, if I do some imaginative cropping, I could actually present something that has almost the same sense of isolation that the prairie houses did, although in a different context, obviously. It really brings into play the beauty of the landscape that these are situated in. Working on the total opposite side of my brain, I've also been more recently working on urban pictures, photographs taken in the city. Something just totally different here. This is a picture of 20 parking garages taken in about a dozen different cities here in the States when I travel. And I just saw all these pieces of infrastructure that nobody really looks at. They use it all day long. I heard something on NPR today that 60% of US cities, the surface of US cities are streets, pavement, basically. And nobody really looks at any of this stuff. And I found it fascinating to go in a little closer and try to make some kind of sense of all this infrastructure that we use and present it in a different kind of way. So these are my parking garages, and these are office buildings done in a similar fashion. Again, about 12 or 13 different cities. And the last couple of pictures here go even further in that direction. This is a parking lot in Ocean City, Maryland. It's a parking lot behind a bar and grill. I basically spent about 2 or 3 hours straddling every parking lot line in that lot. I was surrounded by the crew working that restaurant. They wanted to know what I was doing, but I just felt, a parking lot is probably the most boring thing to look at, and I can probably do something with this that makes, gives it a different perspective. And this is a parking lot here in the Baltimore area. I have a whole series of these. They take a long time to shoot. They're all made from individual photographs. And I just liked the idea of taking something that has absolutely nothing to offer visually and sort of turning it in on itself and presenting it in this way.
All right, thank you, Ben, so much. And last but not least, we have Alfonso.
Hi, everybody. Can you guys hear me? I think so, right? Yes. So I met Costas a couple years ago when I was in my undergrad, my master's degree, and he was so kind to offer me a spot in the gallery a couple years ago, and I've been since with him. My practice is painting, and I've been called like an abstract painter or representative painter. I'm just a painter. So in these photographs that Julia is showing right now is my journey through representative work and symbolism. So some of these, for example, this series that I did, Reflexiones de una Cultura, was me trying to go through my own culture. So few of you guys know my mother. She's actually an indigenous person from Mexico. I didn't know this until she recently started telling me that she speaks Nahuatl, and my grandmother and my great-grandmother, they were all part of indigenous tribe. So I didn't know this. So the symbolism that I'm showing here is that she used to teach me how to draw those symbols, and I didn't know this, and she was actually teaching me how to make a codex. Now, I'm not an art historian, but through this, I've been investigating them and put them into these backgrounds. And yeah, so this is some of the series, like these mythical animals that is showing like Mixquote is the as the god, and trying, this was kind of like a journey to start seeing how can I make more representative work, because my work before was more abstract, more ambiguity was there. So with this, I'm encountering like colors, composition, aesthetics, but most important, like putting these little elephants within the canvas. You can see some of them can see like a face or little, I call them like little artifacts. And as you research them through, is, you know, as you, one of those symbols attracts you, you actually research what the symbol is, it will tell you a different story. So we can go to the next one. So same with this one, this, you know, going to, you know, what was my past, and not to make everybody put in, you know, like this is what you see, but more like open to everybody, to an interpretation. As much as you guys know, this can be like, oh, it's an Aztec, but what is the meaning behind the butterflies or the rabbit? I'm not trying to push it through anybody's throat. So that's why I choose the colors that I was choosing here, even in the other ones, like really, really warm tones. So you can get inside the painting and start unveiling what the paintings are about. We can go to the next one. So the more I was thinking about this series, the more I was started thinking about, because I've been displaced as well. I was born in Mexico City. My family was, you know, my mom from Veracruz, my father from Mexico, but we went all over the place. As I want, some of you guys know my dad is a hippie and my mom is a gypsy that way too. So they were all over the place traveling around. So I've been in Mexico all over the place. But I still have that memory of my family. I haven't been in Mexico since I was 15. I've been in the United States since then. So I remember little tones, little memories, like this is actually my grandma. And I remember, you know, I tried from memory, try to represent her and what was the essence of her through my own memories. So we can go to the next one. So this series, Entrance, I experienced the uprising in Baltimore when I was in grad school. And I started thinking about my own communities, especially Hispanic communities. So I wanted to show what was the working class within these paintings, to make the viewer be part of this painting as well. So some of those paintings, like in this one, you will see that this doesn't have a face, so actually it's connecting with you. The other thing is that this was still hard for me, because this is actually happening. It's been happening since the Bracero program, and from when we brought from World War II, millions of workers from South America, from Central America to work in our farms, lands, and we displaced them at the end. And it is happening today in our backyard. Kids being in cages and people is ignoring it. So in this series, I wanted to make an entrance, mean like this is happening. We can go to the next one. And like, I don't know, especially in this one, Dream of a Border, I mean, a lot of people ask me, well, is this the Mexican border? It's many borders. I mean, I think a lot of people have experienced or seen things that are kind of like borders like this, even from, you know, as you go from Palestine, even our own communities here, right? Or Mexico, or communities that have been displaced. So in this actually painting, I'm trying to capture that innocence of infants or children's, or like what is happening, what is disappearing. And this actually was kind of hard, one of the hardest paintings I've ever done, because in my practice, I always try to know about what I'm showing, but like, to think about shape, form, line, texture, but I couldn't avoid it because that was related to me. And it's maybe to relate it to a lot of people. And I started getting attached to it. So this one took me a little bit to just try to go through it. We can go to the next one. So in this continue, like from the series, an entrance is like kind of like this apocalypse way to see the border, but in like it's really sterilely beautiful. I don't know what's the photo, so you can even see it, but this painting has not only a lot of textures, but this, once again, the symbolism plays a lot of part into these paintings. Sure, is a viewer see it right away, or it's a landscaping with a totem and the totem behind, but actually these are the gates of, in the Aztec culture, the gates of the dead that are going through it, right? And I don't see explicit to say that. I said horizon, but what is mean horizon in our own culture and the culture that I'm exploring through it. And the same with this one. This one's actually one of the latest ones, perceiving. And now I start getting more into the immigration process, the workers that come to work in once again, in our backyards or in everywhere in the United States, the labor that we use, and they are not represented. So I kind of wanted in this one to show in the shape and the form actually a landscaping of their bodies, what they have been crossing by from South America all the way here. So it's actually a map in their bodies of how they've been crossing around to get here. We can go to the next one. Same with this, it's from the series entrance, and we see a child and mystical statue or the symbolism again, but I don't want to give it away too much of the painting, because it really values to me is people actually search them. But I can tell you is that this is the goddess of death for the Aztec culture. It's the one that we know is we call it in the Christianity like limbo. So it's the children looking away, and is this statue or like goddess waiting for this child to come inside, and the Aztec has like this cycle and with this like blue moon to get them back to earth. And that's why I choose the colors as well, to fertilize again and be born again into these things. So I think I think I said it when I was in Creative Alliance. On the hill doesn't have to be related to the restaurant. I think I said it a long time ago, but no, this one is more the same thing. It's really important to me to, especially with my representative work, to show what we see in today. We're playing with the past, present, and future, and what immigration and Mexican Americans and all immigrants that we have built this country are showing. And in this, especially in this painting, is we have the American lady. It's not looking at us, we're looking at her. And all the sins that we have committed are the, in Christianity, all the crosses and everything. You can go to the next one. So I think that's it, right? I'm working on a new series right now, but I don't think we have the photos. It's called 1968, and where I'm working, if you guys want to see that, it's in Instagram. and which I'm playing about the Mexican Olympics of 1968, and where I'm relating to what is happening around us, especially with the Trump era and or political. I'm more political actually, and the new series that I'm making. I will recommend. I mean, I don't have photos here to show you, but I will recommend it because it's a lot of history that is repeating itself inside the United States, and also a lot of the movements like women's movement. You know, the famous protests of civil discourse. So I will recommend to see that. So thank you.
Thank you, Alfonso. Thank you to all three of you for presenting your work. It's such beautiful work and in such great conversation with each other. I'm going to stop my sharing, and we're going to move into our guided question and answer. I've prepared a few questions for the artists, but if any of you in the audience have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. And I just realized I was so engrossed in what everyone was saying. I didn't drop the bios in the chat as I said that I would, so I will do that now. All right, so for our first question, okay, I think my first question is directed at Rania, but for all of these questions, if any artist or viewer has anything to say, please come forward and put in your 2 cents. So I'd like to start this guided question section around this word displacement, which I think all of the artists used at some point. As we mentioned earlier, hundreds of thousands of Lebanese were displaced by the explosions on August 4th. So Rania, as someone whose work features an intimacy of person, place, and space, how do you see your work changing in response to this crisis at home?
You know, somehow, probably since I was born, there's been a crisis at home. So I think it has shaped my work all along in the sense that the sense of displacement is stuff like being here and being from there. Like today, I just had, you know, I was part of a show, but an online show that was raised because today's the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment for the women's right to vote, but also this the second anniversary of the bombings in Lebanon. So I feel like my head is constantly managing both at the same time. So I try in my work to just really focus on both sides of that. I mean, I try to photograph here and there all the time. What just happened in Lebanon, the explosions are way too soon for me to even wrap my head around it. So I've been so focused on raising money through the fundraiser and making the prints. But the irony of it is that the 2 images I picked, I realized that I was always drawn to, when I'm talking about the texture of Beirut, I'm always very much drawn to the old fabric of the city. And a lot of it is this destruction that's been remaining since the civil war in Lebanon. And it's this backdrop and collective memory that all this young generation is growing by, you know, with that as a backdrop. So I've been thinking a lot about that backdrop now. The past is becoming the present, or the present is becoming the past in a way. Like there's a whole new layer of destruction and aftermath. And I'm just anxious to go to Lebanon to see it firsthand, basically. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm still processing what happened, I have to say. Yeah, and my focus has been really just trying to raise the money and setting the prints.
Right, amazing. And so Ben and Alfonso, you both witnessed the displacement of marginalized communities in Baltimore City as many of these neighborhoods change. Ben, when speaking about your series Last House Standing in a 2015 interview with Baltimore Styles magazine, you said, and I'm reading a quote here, "My intention was to present simultaneous strands of despair and defiance throughout these photo essays. Many of the solo row houses started to appear in the decades following the 1968 riots. Neighborhoods that had been vital for decades underwent massive upheavals and began to die a slow death. Unfortunately, I expect to encounter new solo row houses as time passes. So of course, this quote came after the 2015 riots in response to the death of Freddie Gray while in police custody. So Ben and Alfonso, how have you seen Baltimore change over this past 5 years? And is it the displacement that you anticipated, Ben, when you were talking about this in 2015?
Well, honestly, I haven't seen any new solo row houses. I've seen the ones that were solo being destroyed, being leveled now. I don't know if it's because the attitudes are different than they were 40, 50, 60 years ago. I'm not sure. I really expected to see some demolitions and more eminent domain. I mean, Baltimore has a lot of problems right now, but I expected to see somebody stand up for their house. Maybe I was wrong. You know, clearly I was wrong. And in fact, I had to go back and re-photograph the older solo houses that are now vacant lots. So it went in the other direction, unfortunately. I mean, the good thing is a lot of these blocks look like they may in fact be revitalized. So that's, you know, I'll be around to photograph that part of it, but that'll take time.
I think for me, after to see the uprising after Freddie Gray, I experienced it through the school and all that stuff. Then I moved to Creative Alliance for my residency over there. And I haven't always been optimistic. I know Baltimore City and Baltimore County and whole entire Maryland has been his issues, but you know, experience me going to, you know, after the uprising and cleaning the streets with them, I always have this sense of hope to them. And when I was by Patterson Park, I saw a lot of the community being together as well. So has it been changed for me to the displacement? I still feel optimistic that the city will, you know, will push forward. I have my love and hate relationship with the city, but at the same time, I think I'm glad that things are being, you know, especially for me, especially over there in Patterson Park, that the community start getting together, and you know, all these issues that are being happening today are being shown. Especially, it has been a couple protests about the Hispanic Hispanics rights and what is happening in the border, especially. Mm-hmm. And very fortunate that I have a lot of friends that are activists, so they keep me pretty, you know, when something's happened, they send me like hundreds of photographs just to digest this. But just to finish for the answer, I'm optimistic, and I have always think that Baltimore will always shine because, you know, all of us were here. So we can see through these hard moments, especially in the COVID-19, we're helping each other. So, yeah.
Great, thank you. So turning back to Rania's project, I'm talking specifically about the series She, which focuses, like you said, on girlhood and womanhood. So these stories of identity and change bring to mind Alfonso's paintings, which stem from his experience growing and changing while being forced to assimilate to American culture. So when the women in Rania's photo series She are shown in various landscapes, these landscapes are natural and industrial. The figures in some of Alfonso's paintings have this newfound and forced relationship to the American landscape, more specifically, like you mentioned, the border between the US and Mexico. And so we did sort of talk about this a little bit already, but if both of you could talk a little bit more about the relationship between the figure and space or place.
You know, it's interesting because a lot of my work that, I mean, that we didn't show here, but like I had done a project called A Girl in Her Room where I photographed teenage girls in their bedroom. So the whole sense of space and personal space is important to me. This is the first, I would say, and it's interesting because even though I did the Syrian refugees as a side project, but I feel like I started looking at the outside as well as being a space. And, and it's was probably in the back of my mind when this started, this whole project about leaving home, being in the landscape. It's kind of not really a displacement, even though everything about me and my family and my background is kind of based on displacement, but here it's maybe on transition, I want to say. And so the landscape is very integrated. It's the space that is this temporary space that the girl is very much making her own in a way. The thing that's important to me is these young women at that age, I'm finding through my daughters, it's really hard to be 20 today. I mean, and there's always like this tangible side life, and now here we are on Zoom. But this is even before that. I feel like they were all on Instagram and on their phone, and so I wanted to photograph them in something that felt very real and physical, and how would their own texture shines. On a personal level, my hair had been falling down for a while, and I became obsessed with our own texture, and so that became important for me in doing that. I don't know if that really answered your questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for me, it's like it's the relation between figure and space and place. I think for me is for me is the figures become the political discord that is happening around us, right? I want to put that in top, because it's, I mean, once again, for me, and we can talk for hours about this. For me, when I paint, there are figures and shapes and forms, but then they become something else, right? So those figures for me and for everybody else, they become their own reality, right? So I've been a little more aggressive to show not only the figure in the space, but the space is being kind of like shined back to the viewer, and where like I speak about borders and political discourse, but at the same time it's my own experience as well, being as an immigrant to the United States and assimilating all these process. So and also when it comes to the figures that I'm showing, they're not showing their faces at all. So that's another way to play with the space and place, right? I have talked to a few of my colleagues. It's like, they say, oh, but is that the south or is that the north? We don't know. It's where you wanted to make it, right? It's where what it relates to you. I mean, all of in the United States, we're all immigrants here, right? So in some point, you can relate to the space of that figure. So that's how I see it. So.
Yeah, and that actually leads me quite well into my next question for Alfonso and Ben. This idea, like you said, of abstracting the figure too. So we have this sort of like altered idea of what we're looking at. Ben and Alfonso, both of your work, there is this certain level of abstracting reality, and that is a way of focusing on color and form, but you're still also at the same time making these works that tell stories and document real events. So if you both could talk about the role of abstraction in political driven artwork.
You want to go first, Ben?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I think I use abstraction as alarm, the sound of an alarm. I think about me as a human when I see things, especially in painting, because painting is not like a photograph, and I'm not comparing between which one is best. But sometimes, when being painting gives me the ability to be more, had more ambiguity, so I can abstract something. So to just have the viewer just to stop for 1 second and, to realize what they're seeing. that's what I'm doing with abstraction. Kind of like yeah, like I said, like a sound of an alarm. Like you need to pay attention what it is. The other, how I play with abstraction for me has become more as a sensitive thing too, because once again, in the last paintings that you see and that we saw, are symbols in there, which for me, I transform it into kind of these abstract things for the viewer, not only to play with them, but to learn from them and what they mean and and I'm connecting all these lines from the past, present, and future to maybe can be something later or something less. So that's how I see abstraction, the use of abstraction in things. So
my house pictures aren't particularly abstract in any way. That's really more that other side of the brain that we looked at earlier. However, I wanted to make the pictures as epic and formally done as possible to really shed the light on those houses in transition. They weren't meant to be documentary photographs or editorial in any way. I really wanted to formalize them and make you directly look at the situation, that these houses are in, or these camps and so on, and make you think a little bit more in that indirect kind of a way, as opposed to being overtly political about it. You have to remember, I'm an outsider in these neighborhoods, even though I live only a mile from a lot of these solo row houses. The fact is, I'm not of those neighborhoods, and I have to be sympathetic. I don't want to exploit something that I don't really understand as well as the people who live there do. But at any rate, I wanted to make very formal pictures front and center that draws your eye to what these houses are like, the beauty, and then, of course, all the desolation around it, and the questions all that poses.
Interesting. Thank you both. Rania, thinking back to the Windows series that you're still currently working on now, so you've been making these series of photographs since the global COVID-19 pandemic has started, featuring those portraits in windows. And so similar to your series, She, we get that sense of peering into the lives of the subjects when they're at ease or expressing some sort of vulnerability. Yet with these new photographs, there's that extra layer of voyeurism due to that literal sheet of glass that separates you and your subject. Can you talk about how the pandemic changed the way that you approached your studio practice?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting because all my work, I mean, we didn't show the earlier work, I strive to get that intimacy with my work, with the people I photograph. And that was a challenge for me when I started the Window Project, because I'm like, I need to get that intimacy. And how do I do that when there's a physical separation between me and people? And the other thing that was different is I actually bought a digital camera for this work. All my other work was made on film, on medium format film. I felt like there was nobody developing film, and there's so much reflection that I felt like I needed to see what I'm doing a little more. And there's such an immediacy to this project that I didn't want to wait till I get it, scan the film, and see it 6 months later, because we're living it like right now. So that was the first change for me in how to juggle all of that. The second is, I realized that which was great, is the fact that I was aware that I'm trying to get that intimacy. And how do I do that when I'm separated? And I realized that I started spending the time. Like, I didn't go and take a quick picture from the window, but I spent a good 45 minutes to an hour with people. Everybody had the time, there was something beautiful about that, if we could say. But, and it's interesting because you could build that intimacy without actually touching people or without talking. But, the fact that people are being seen and I'm looking at them, and I'm trying to have a conversation. Sometimes I'm screaming, sometimes there's another window that's open, sometimes we have two phones on speaker on either side of it. So whatever it is, it was I think I find that I ended up photographing, besides the fact that I went to a digital camera and there's a barrier, I found that ironically, I ended up photographing more the way I always photographed than I thought I would be. And it was, you know, often I would give minimal direction to people because sometimes there's so much reflection that I couldn't even see the person, and I had to place myself so I don't see myself in the window. So I had to maybe ask people to move a little bit here and there. And I love hands. I feel like hands are so expressive. So I would tell people to just show me their hands any way they want. So I might give direction, but let people run with it. And I realized the longer the photo shoot, the more people feel comfortable to just own up to it as well. So, and then sometimes they could do something, I put the camera down, I talk to them, and when I put the camera down, people kind of just relax and do this. And I'm like, oh, can you hold this? So we just rebuild the session a little bit. But it's been something very rewarding. I mean, I think everybody was craving this intimacy and connection that I would go. Often I had like flowers waiting for me at the door, or chocolate, or cards, or little bags with, I had them around my desk actually, like little bags with little stones. One of them says, thank you. So there was something beautiful about a connection that was created without the physical touching somehow.
Yeah.
So it was I thought it was beautiful for me anyway.
That is beautiful. I think for the sake of time, I'm actually going to open that question up to both Alfonso and Ben as well, and sort of combine it with some of the other thoughts I have and questions I have for you, because I think about all of your work in this relationship, and the way that I see it as a viewer, one of the similarities I see is the incredible ability that all three of you have to freeze a moment in time and space, which seems really important to the work and to its place in history. And as Rania said, like COVID has changed our relationship to time in a really real way. So I'm wondering more about all of your studio practices, how this landscape has changed, how you see your work as it relates to time, and just what the role of the artist is, in your opinion, during this current landscape. Anybody?
I'll start.
Okay, oh, sorry, Ben, go ahead.
No, I'll start. Obviously, with the house pictures, time is a really big deal. The passing of time. You can see it sometimes in just one picture, then in others when I relive the same scene 10 years apart. COVID has really, it's surreal in a way, good and bad. I mean, of course, it's awful what's going on, but it's also focused me. You know, I've been thinking about mortality and, you know, what do I leave behind, even though, you know, hopefully nothing ever happens, but you start thinking, let's get away from the busy work here, that I'm always involved in these little projects and these little projects. And I started to really focus on some of the more important things, like, you know, getting some books made. You know, the skies are blue and the clouds are really white out there. And it's great shooting out there. It's very quiet in the woods. Nobody is chasing me like they usually do on their ATVs, chasing me off their property. And I've been able to really focus and use the time, you know, that's been given to me here.
Go ahead, Rania.
No. Okay, I'll make it quick. I'm interested in the sense
there.
of time because all my work has been following my daughters as they're growing up. So I had a project that I did, I call L'Enfant Femme, where I photographed girls when they were like pre-puberty. Then I'm re-photographing the girls after puberty, and some of them I'm following through the years now. And for me, it's also as my girls are growing, I'm photographing girls as they get older. And then I did a mother-daughter project when my daughter left for college. And for me, that was the sense of time, where I'm realizing as she's leaving home, she's growing up and I'm growing older. So that was a very different sense of time on the big picture. In the immediate picture, the sense of time with COVID, as Ben said, it's starting to be a new normal though. Like I feel like now we're getting busier again. I think earlier, the slowness, I think there was something in some weird way beautiful about it. Because I feel like we were all, I mean, especially after like the Guggenheim, my youngest son left for college, I was traveling all the time. And there was something beautiful about just slowing down and looking at work and editing the work and having the time to recoup and to think about the art you're making versus just making it, I feel. So I think that's the gift of time that we're offered. And I hope we remember that when life gets busier again, somehow. Sorry, Alfonso.
That's okay. I think for me, I mean, with my practice, I mean, I'm always painting. I mean, it's in my brain. When I see a white wall, I'm always sketching. But what I think has changed for me, I think is more once again, the political discourse, especially in the last work. I think for me, once again, I mean, I still wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning to prepare the studio, but I'm paying more attention. I mean, I pay attention before. It's just for me, you know, as an artist, was more the observant, and then, you know, getting inside and then do something. Not this time, I don't think. For me, it's important to understand what is happening to compare it to the past, right? Like what is happening with the election or what is happening. And once again, I mean, this is for me, what is happening in our borders is most important to me. And not only that, but what is happening around our communities. I still go and do my walk every afternoon, and I see people realizing more what is happening. So when I come back to my studio, I enjoy that, and I make the commitment to make a painting every day, using different materials this time. Like, you know, some of my friends have told me, stop posting, man. Like, this is annoying. But I paint every day. Yeah, I don't know. I always say that painting brought me so many places, and painting is gonna bring me somewhere else. So it's painting, the practice is always there. So yeah.
That's great. Thank you all so much for sharing your work and your stories with us. I haven't seen any questions pop up in the chat yet, but if any of our viewers have any questions for our panelists, please feel free to speak up now. And we'll give a few minutes for anyone's final thoughts. And then I want to be respectful of our artists' time here that they shared with us today. So yeah, any questions from our outside viewers? All right. Well, thank you so much, all of you, for participating with us today. I am recording this lecture, and it will be available on our website for those of you who were, or for any of your friends who may not have been able to attend tonight. I know there are some other Baltimore virtual events happening this evening, so I appreciate all of your presence here today. Thank you again, panelists, and yeah, I look forward to some more collaboration. I think Constantine has a great way of fostering very long-term relationships, so I'm sure we'll all be in touch for some time now.
Thank you, Julia. Nice meeting you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you so much,
your work is
everybody.
wonderful.
Thank you.
Awesome
Thank
to
you.
see.
So nice to, yeah, so nice to be in the group with you all. And thank you, Julia. Very nice.
Yeah. Nice event.
Hang back.
Thank you. It was wonderful. Everything is at Costas now. In other words, if
Thank you. I enjoyed it, Julia.
The show is up. You're welcome.
Oh, good.
We're open by
Thank you,
appointment.
guys.
Just
Open by appointment. Thank you.
yeah.
you.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Stay well.
Bye.
Bye.
Wear your masks so we can get this thing over with.
See you, Julia. I see you later. Thank you, guys.
Thank you,
Bye.
Julia. Thank you. Bye.
Raina, I loved that pregnant woman. What did she have?
Oh, I think Rania just signed off.
Oh, I wonder if she had a boy or girl. Thank you. I'll call you. Thank you.